Good. Good to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do I need to stand back a little bit? Does that help?
No,
Or?
That's good right there.
This one. Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Ed Burdell. This is the Christchurch Community Issues Forum. Today we have two speakers to do a pro and con on issue 2 of state legislation, the legalization of marijuana for recreational use. Speaking in opposition to the amendment to the issue is Jodi Salvo, who is Director of Substance Abuse Prevention Services for Ohio Guidestone. Ohio Guidestone is a nonprofit, one of the largest in the state, specializing in behavioral health services. She will be followed to the podium by Brian Kessler, who is CEO of SBL Venture Capital, which is based in LA. He's representing the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana like Alcohol. So with no further ado, here comes Jodi, and then we'll go to questions a little later on.
Good morning. My name is Jodi Salvo, and I'm glad to be here today. And the work I do around the state is really to prevent youth substance use. So I'm going to kind of bathe issue 2 and what are some of the concerns that I have around recreationally legalizing. So I'm going to kind of put it into 3 buckets. Honestly, I probably could talk about this issue for a day or longer, but I'm going to really speak about how the concerns that we have around legalizing marijuana for recreational use on its impact to young people, the negative impact on business, and public safety concerns, in particular drug driving and increase in the illicit market. So in order to really kind of understand where I'm coming from is I think it's imperative that Ohioans understand that marijuana has changed over time. So a lot of adults, people my age, might feel, weed, what's the big deal? I used to use it, I know people that use it, I know people that still use today, and their lives have not been negatively impacted. So if you look at the PowerPoint, I'm in my mid-50s. So when I was in high school, marijuana and potency, THC, the psychoactive ingredient in a cannabis plant, was really only about 3%, and we did not see addiction with 3%. If you're from the 60s, it was 1 to 2%. So people in my generation might have used and really not had any issues with cannabis. However, THC potency has been increasing over time, and we get to 2010, the THC potency really hits about 10%.
Jodi?
Yes.
It's going to come up and share screen on so they can see the PowerPoint.
Apologies.
No problem.
Recording in progress.
Okay, sorry about that. I was just saying before we started, technology always seems to be the major issue. So anyways, getting back to THC potency increasing over time, around 2010, the THC potency hit 10%, and that's when we started seeing cannabis use disorder. Actually, cannabis use disorder was really named in the DSM, that's the diagnostic manual that we used for diagnosing, in around 2012. So that was a direct correlation to the increase in THC potency. However, when we have seen legalization across other states, and I'll just kind of go to Colorado in 2012, that's when we've really seen an uptick in THC potency. So in our streets now, THC from plant matter really could be around anywhere from 13% to mid-20s. So the potency continues to increase. But with recreational legalization, in addition to plant matter, we can see cannabis extracts, products that then the THC potency goes all the way up to 99%. So what does that mean? It means it's a different drug. It's a different drug than we typically think with a cannabis plant. And I can also say it's not all natural when we're talking anything above 35%. So concentrates have risen with legalization. So I just kind of want to show persons what we're talking about. Right now, pre-legalization, this is what cannabis looks like on our streets right now. So if you're older, you're my age, it might look like the joint, it might look like a bong in your head. For young people, it looks like these devices. They're vape devices, they're dab pens, they're different forms. And then if you look at the yellow ones, those are really more, and when you look at it, that's marijuana concentrates. And that is more like street level drug use right now. So what they're able to do, you extract the THC, usually use a chemical process, butane, ethanol, and it creates a very potent concentrate of cannabis. But this is not the same all natural drug as a plant that you were looking at, you know, prior to probably 2012. But I want you to look at, this is what substances look like right now, and you need to know the vape devices, much higher potency, those are starting and you're 30% going up, and that's already how our youth choose to use cannabis right now. Our young people are not really using plant matter. They're using vape devices, and they would prefer to use edibles and gummies and other things because it's easier to conceal. But you need to understand it's also higher potency marijuana products. So I want you to look at this photo before I show you what happens with legalization. The products change. So where this is concerning, all of these infused products, edibles, which would be gummies, drinks, anything that's infused, those vape cartridges, really high potency, and what they do for our young people, it decreases their perception of harm. Because when you look at this, this no longer looks like a drug, okay? So where my concern is for our young people is their perception of harm around marijuana. It's already been decreasing because we have marijuana as medicine. So in a young person's brain, it's medicine, it's helpful, it's better than. And adults, because they don't understand the change of potency. Adults tend to use the language, well, it's safer than alcohol. Well, yeah, it's safer than alcohol because alcohol has clearly done the most damage to our states and our nation. Cannabis has not, because it has not been legalized, but also because we've not had these potencies, nor have we had them tested. So we really do not know what the long-term effects of high-potency cannabis is going to do to our young people. So substance use really is about perception of harm. So I will say in our states that have recreationally legalized, we haven't seen that uptick in youth use, but we have seen a decrease in their perception of harm. And where we've seen the uptick is really in that 18 to 25. So the concern is, my job is to prevent youth substance use, but I work across the continuum on prevention, treatment, and recovery. We have a drug crisis already here in Ohio. We battle it every day. We have a mental health crisis. So what happens is, in order to make our communities and our state healthier, we need to stop filling the funnel of substance use initiation. And that starts with not having our kids think that this is safe, this is healthier, this is better than, because we really need to protect our young people from using. How addiction works is the younger the use, the greater the chance for addiction. So at my age, I could probably use cannabis and I could probably use these products without struggling with addiction or dependence because my brain is fully developed. A young person, a young girl, her brain is not developed till 24, 25. Men, emerging research is 28 to 30 at this point. So if they start using high potency products at a younger age, and let me say an underage, right now in Ohio, the average age of initiation for a young person with a nicotine vape device is 13. Okay, that's 7th grade. They become addicted very easily, but the problem is the same devices that you can use to vape nicotine, you can use to vape marijuana. So there used to be a leap for young people to start using marijuana, but there's not that big gap anymore because they already have the device, the cannabis is available, and how youth use happens, it's based off of availability and access. So if we legalize, it will be much easier, and I will let you know now, it's already easy for young people to access cannabis, especially with adults feeling, you know, this is safer than alcohol. So that's some of my concerns around youth use and product change. So, issue 2, let's talk about it. What it allows up to 2.5 ounces of cannabis. But I want to show you what that 2.5 ounces looks like. I will let you know this is oregano, so we don't have cannabis up here. But 2.5 ounces is equivalent to about 200 to 220 joints. So this is legal on your person, okay? But in addition to that, each individual over the age of 21 is allowed to have 6 cannabis plants, and a household 21 cannabis plants. So I'm concerned about how are we going to secure that? How are we going to keep our young people safe around that? And this legislation also allows for very high THC levels. So remember I said that's where addiction has happened. So it allows for up to 35% THC for plant matter and 90% THC for concentrates. Different drug. We also do not have the research or long-term effects. And that's very concerning that we would want to legalize without knowing what kind of damage it's going to be doing to our young people. The research comes in every day. If you search scientific journals, we can see that our universities and testing sites are trying to figure out what these impacts are there, but the outcomes still aren't here. I mean, we see it with fertility, we see it for suicide, we see it for mental health exacerbation. So I really caution Ohio not to jump into something until we know what the long-term impact might be, especially if we're going to start younger consumers using. So I also want to let you see, this is what 12 cannabis plants look like. This is legal in a home. This could get a whole entire, well, way more than one city block stoned with a cannabis plant. So I just wanted you to see what amounts we're talking about. Way more than any family needs if they want to use. You could be stoned every day for the rest of your life. So again, I'm focusing on the youth impact. People who begin using marijuana before the age of 18 are 4 to 7 times more likely to struggle with dependence and addiction. Again, it goes down to availability and access. So that's very concerning. We also can look at research where when you have dispensaries in communities, that's where you have increased youth use. We can look that there's permanent decreases in IQ, permanent, 8%. So an average IQ is 100. You take 8% off of that. I mean, you're taking it from an A to a C student or a C to an F student. So we need to be mindful of, there's some long-term studies about impact. We've definitely seen increase in cannabis use disorder. So these are some of the areas of concern that I would have around legalization. You will hear people argue all the time of, does youth use go up or not? And I will be real honest with you, you really have to have agreed on standards of what you're looking at and agreed on reputable research studies. So people will often look at the state of Colorado and they don't realize only 30% of the state is recreationally legalized. So we have to agree on, are we going to look at the 30% or are we going to look at the outcomes of the state as a whole? So those are some nuances of when you're doing Google searches on what does the research actually say. Cannabis use disorder increased 25%, and that was in Colorado since legalization. So you'll have a lot of people question, why is that? But I think, again, we need to look at the outcomes in the studies before we jump into legalization. This is from Colorado. I pull Colorado because they have maintained statistics since pre-medicinal to recreational till now. But a 15% increase in youth under the age of 15 using. We have families not storing properly. I fight the opioid epidemic every day of my life. It's about proper storage. People come in through that because homes are not securing their medication. We see the increase on youth use on the dabbing. That is those concentrated, those little yellow ones. The words have changed. It's dabbing, shatter, wax. Those are those really high potency. And again, no one's offering up their kids for research studies right now, so we do not know what the long-term effects of that is for brain development. See a 400% increase in ER visits, and we can look at all the states on that, the Canadian market, we can look at other areas where ER visits are very real. First of all, if you have gummies, kids use them, they mistake them for other candy products. They're, again, those real high potency products. So it's an area of concern for young people. The other thing on those little gummies, you always need to look at portion and dosage on that, because often one gummy is multiple portions or dosages. And I can promise you, if a little kid sees a gummy, they're going to put the whole thing in their mouth. But the other thing you have to understand with edibles, it takes about half an hour to an hour to get you high. So if a young person is trying to get high and they're using edibles, they will often take it in half an hour, not feeling anything, take another gummy or whatever infused product that they're doing, and you will see exacerbations in health. It's actually called cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, and you see that in recreationally legalized states. So it becomes toxic or an overdose for a young person. So those are some of those nuances we have to really be mindful of with our young people, because they're certainly going to go to edibles because it's easier to conceal. Again, increased youth use where there's dispensaries. I always need to bring up mental health with cannabis. We already have marijuana for medicine here in Ohio. So I really dislike the argument on issue 2. Let's legalize it so everybody can have access to it. If people want to use it, adults want to use, they can go to our medical dispensaries. They're very well controlled. We've had guardrails placed on the medical program. There's not advertising, there's not crazy packaging. But what you need to know with mental health and cannabis, if someone is looking for cannabis for anxiety, for depression, you do not want a high THC product. You want a high CBD, that non-psychoactive ingredient, because that's where the medical promise is. But the high THC products, and you know what they consider high THC? 10%. And we're talking 90%. So when you look at any research, those high THC products actually are exacerbating anxiety. You're seeing those correlations with suicide. I also coordinate the Suicide Prevention Coalition in our county. We have problems in our state with mental health crisis and suicide, and there's so much emerging research connecting cannabis and suicide. In fact, in Colorado, the #1 death for young people is suicide, and that's not the case in other states, so it's usually accidents and stuff like that. So again, we need to be very careful. Also, you see psychosis and schizophrenia. There is a ton of emerging research right now on schizophrenia and psychosis. In fact, it's predominantly with young men between the age of 14 and 18, chronic high-potency users. 40% of chronic high-potency young men can suffer with marijuana-induced psychosis and schizophrenia, and it's only 4% of our females. So even to see that emerging research should stop us in our tracks to say, let's figure out the science before we go ahead with legalization. Again, I kind of talked about emergency room visits with our young people. I think we need to be mindful of public safety. The drug driving stats should take our breath away. 50% of all Oregon drivers assessed tested positive for marijuana. We've seen increases in crashes and fatal crashes in other states. And in my own county, we have had trend data for years now, and every single year we see people self-reporting on marijuana use, but they're also self-reporting that marijuana does not impact their driving. If you talk to law enforcement, state highway patrol, they will tell you that they see drunk driving 24/7. It's not just like drinking on the weekends and the evenings, but it is quite often. So I think we need to be mindful of our public safety. I also think we need to be mindful of the increase in the illicit market when we get to crime. So you will hear proponents of issue 2 say, you know, we recreationally legalize it, we will not have a problem with crime in our communities. However, anytime you recreationally legalize, you will see a rise in the illicit market. And it takes you 1 second to figure this out. When you're purchasing at a dispensary, there is still a tax. So the price will always be a little bit higher than what the illicit market can bring in. And the illicit market will not only bring in a lower priced product, but the chance of it being tainted, I would say, is very high. And then you have to think it's just legalized for adult use. So if our young people want to access it, the illicit market is thriving in our communities, our children have a much higher chance of purchasing weed, marijuana concentrates that can be adulterated with methamphetamines, fentanyl, other drugs. So that should be an eye-opener for all of us. Some other concerns I have with issue 2, it's only saying a 10% tax rate. That is so insane to me. Most all states are in between 20 and 40%, kind of staying at 30% tax rate. So there is no amount of money that a 10% tax rate is going to give us to really battle societal costs, such as addiction and any of the other issues that might arise. And not only in that 10%, issue 2 is saying that about 36% of that 10% goes back into the industry to assist people that have been unfairly impacted on the war on drugs or on how marijuana has affected them. So we're going to give money right back into the industry to help people that might have been users of marijuana. I'm not going to get into, I'll say it this way. I do feel we need criminal justice reform. 100%, I will give you that. But legalizing a drug is not the way to do that. Legalizing a drug puts more drugs in disadvantaged communities. That's not what we need to do. We need to really look at criminal justice reform. Legalizing drugs is not the reason to do that. So that would be one of my concerns. You will hear arguments that if we legalize marijuana, you'll see a decrease in the opioid epidemic. I'm telling you right now, this is the war I fight every day. There is no person that is going to transition from an opioid, heroin, fentanyl addiction to marijuana. It doesn't happen. You will see poly use always with addiction. So this isn't a way to solve our community problems. This is very concerning that in a drug crisis, why would we put more drugs with high potency levels? This isn't an all-natural plant right now that we're talking. This is a drug that can do harm, that there's absolute great evidence of addiction around cannabis. I kind of think that's probably where I'm going to stop right now. And then at this point, I'm sorry.
Brian.
Brian, come on up here.